Hey, nice to see you again in my advanced programming course. This is the lesson probably most of you have been waiting for, which is the introduction to vectors. So vectors, it allows you to use a dynamic array, meaning that you don't have to fiddle with sizes and all that annoying things that C++ forces you to do. A vector is a dynamically allocating array. It dynamically allocates memory as it goes through as you push data into the vector. So the first thing we must be aware of is we must have an include vector library. We must include the vector library. And then every time we use vector, we need to use the std namespace. Okay. Now, so it is a one-dimensional array, and it is going to be dynamic. And there are ways to define and initialize it. So this first way is kind of like the most common way that you want to initialize it, where you'd not define any size. Okay, you could, if you're kind of used to it, you can say, okay, I initially want a size of 10, but this really doesn't matter because you can push more than 10 elements as automatically. Okay, and then you can define and initialize it as well. So I can also do that, which is going to define my vector with 10 elements, and then each element is going to have the value 2. Okay, so let's take a look at a better example of how we can use this now. So let's assume that we want to just keep some employee data. And for starters, we just want to keep their just 5 employees, right? And we're just going to keep their hours. So we're just going to do hours. And then the number of employees is going to be MPS. Okay. Now, the way that we can read data in is pretty much similar to how we would do with an array. So I can say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than num emps, I plus plus. And then we can ask for values, right? So hours worked for employee number. And we do I plus 1. And we do that. And then we can do std cin and then hours of I. Okay. And then if I want to print them out, I can just do the following. So we're just going to read a couple of hours for each employee worked, what each employee worked, and then we'll just print the data out. So if we do that, I don't like that. Let's do this. Let's do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Okay. So here you see that I should have said with here. Let's do 5, something like that. I think that'll look better. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. There we go. So it looks a lot better. So again, you're still in that realm where when you loop, okay, you can loop through up to a certain size, and when you access the vector, you're going to use subscript notation. Okay, so we're not getting out of that. We're not getting out of that. But there's one advantage to this. What we could do is we can now utilize something called the size. So if I was to declare this without a size, and I went up to, I kind of did like a loop that says enter a number of employees until. I don't really have to understand, I don't have to know the size of the vector. So let me do that real quick. So if I did that, and I can say hours employee worked, and then over here I can just add press Q to quit. Okay. Let's do this here. Let's do that. So I'm going to declare a vector without any sizes. Okay, so we can take this out so you don't get confused. We're just gonna use a letter indicator that will allow us to quit. Okay, so I'm gonna change this to a while. So while letter is not equal to Q. I'm going to do the same thing here, just a couple of modifications. I'm going to just okay. So while letter is not equal to Q, I am going to enter data. Now, this is a little bit incomplete because what I want to do is I want to introduce another function that is part of the vector. Okay, that is called the vector, the pushback function. Okay, it's called the pushback function. So this pushback function allows me to push an element of the data type that I've declared, right? So in this case, the template uses int, right? If it would have been a double, I could have used a double, but in this case, we're using int. We're going to enter employees until the user enters Q, okay? Until the user enters Q. And then if the user, well, actually, that's a bad one. Maybe if he enters -1, because we want to stick to a, so let's do this. Let's take this. Well, our in is not equal to -1. Then we stay in here, right? Type -1 to quit. Okay. So what we're doing here is we changed this a bit from a while loop. So it takes a little bit more in terms of just trying to get a dynamic sense, dynamic allocation in place. It's going to take a little bit more code, but now I don't have to worry about the size of my hours vector. What I can do is I'll have the user stop, right? I don't care about the size because once we keep pushing back the data, the size function is going to tell me how much employees the user entered. So let's do the following. Let's type in -1 to quit hours work for employee 1. I'm going to do 20. Then I'm going to do 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So I'm going to keep going until maybe the 9th employee. I'm just going to type in -1. And see that? Okay, see that? Now, there's a little bit of a bug here. Okay, that this gets pushed, right? It gets pushed. So if they type in -1, I have to do a if our in is not equal to -1, then we want to push, right? And then we also want to increment our employee count. And then that will fix this error where, this bug, where I'm getting the -1 here, right? So now I don't have to worry about any sizing, none of that crap. Okay, I can just use the size method and then I can keep pushing data onto the vector. Now, where is this vector variable stored? Good thing about this is it's stored in the heap, so you don't have to worry about stack overflows and all that. It will allocate as much memory as probably your machine can allocate, right, in terms of your hard drive space. But there is a limitation depending on the operating system, so you have to make sure that uh, I mean, if you want to allocate 100 gigs, I'm not sure if that's going to work. Okay, you'd have to test it and see. I've never maximized the vector. Okay, but I think the vector is a very useful type, an object that you can use, and you should learn how to use it, because the more you process data, the less you're going to rely on arrays. Now, why is it that I teach arrays in the beginning and not just teach vectors? Because now you understand what dynamic memory allocation means, right? So underneath the covers, this vector is really pointers reallocating memory as you push data onto the vector. Okay, and you would only understand what I'm saying is if you took my previous lectures and understood pointers and all that, and just memory allocation in general. Okay, so I gave you an introduction to vectors. I hope you can continue doing this, how to push data, and I'll be using vectors in my examples as we go through this course. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next lecture.